Hello and welcome back to FantasyFootballFix.com, the leading platform to help you build your team value, giving you the best chance of increasing your overall rank and helping you to win those all-important mini-leagues. And welcome back specifically to another episode of Eddie versus the Algorithm. And this is a series where myself, FPL Phillips, takes on the algorithm put together by FantasyFootballFix.com, a team selected for that specific game week in a free hit draft. I go away, try to put together my own team of 11 to take it on and see if I can come out on top every single game week of the season. So before we get into revealing the algorithm team for game week 28 and double game week 28, let's have a quick recap of how we got on in game week 27 and did I manage to come out on top against the algorithm side in a game week that actually seemed to be pretty underwhelming for the majority of managers. And so then here is how the algorithm team got on for game week 27 in a game week where we were expecting a pretty decent points total from this algorithm side. It didn't manage to live up to what was projected for it. And of course that was mainly due to those Burnley assets really failing to deliver in what could have been a great scoring week for them with that double that they did have. Of course no clean sheets in either of their two games, with Ben Mee going off before half-time and Burnley's second of the two, only rubbing salt into the wounds of owners, whether that was one time or people who have brought him in permanently. Weghorst, of course, nothing from him at all in terms of attacking returns as well, which was really quite poor. Only 3 points for him, who was captained by the algorithm and really failed to deliver. The only bright sparks were a couple of clean sheets here and there from the likes of Man City and Southampton, so if you own any defenders from those teams like the algorithm did with Laporte and Bednarek, then you seem to have a pretty decent week, as well as Heung-min Son and Harry Kane of Spurs, who of course combined in a very impressive win for Tottenham in game week 27. Che Adams of course managed to grab a goal too, a very nice total from him of 6 points, pretty decent in game week 27 you would have to say. But despite De Bruyne and Fernandez's blanks, a decent total of 62 points for the algorithm in a game week where, as I mentioned, it was rather poor for a lot of us managers in FPL. And when it came to changes I made to the algorithm side, it got even worse, with 4 points less than the algorithm, giving me a total of 58 points for the game week. I actually did make a few changes that actually worked out for the positive. Cancelo coming in for Laporte and Livramento in place of Bednarek turned out to be the right moves, with a couple of bonus points added in there. But the changes I made in midfield did prove to be costly, and did going with Broja over Che Adams up top. I have to say, it was rather unlucky, I think, for Mahrez and Sancho to both not start in their games. Sterling also grabbing nothing as well, which seems to happen. He seems to forget how to play football every time we do seem to bring him in to our FPL teams, the majority of managers. We kept Son, we kept Kane was the only silver lining, but once again, going with the algorithm side, it seemed like a no-brainer to stick with Son and Kane in this game week if you had them. We also had some points stuck on the bench, which was worse than ever. So Kulusevski, who I went with as a bit of a punt, but didn't quite have the balls to start, was down there with his 8-pointer, as was Amati, who was never in consideration for me. But I did consider starting Kulusevski and perhaps going with a double Man City defence instead of Mahrez or Sterling in midfield. So it was rather disappointing to see him return whilst he was pinned to that first sub. But yeah, nonetheless, not too bad of a game week, but equally really not what we should be expecting from free hit drafts in each game week. But 28, looking onwards and upwards, looks like it could be one hell of a week for people who are on a free hit, a wild card, or maybe even a bench boost. So let's get into and have a look at what the free hit team is looking like and what the algorithm has selected for this upcoming week. So then, let's get into having a look at the algorithm team for game week 28, a game week I'm sure a lot of people, including yourselves watching, hopefully are excited for, including myself, even though I am not playing a wildcard or free hit. I am still very excited to see what this team has to offer, with, looking at it, a very strong bench of Vardy, Mount and Dean. And of course, when we're looking at teams this week, a lot of the teams that are doubling don't have the most expensive assets in their teams. For example, Liverpool aren't doubling. Other teams like Spurs, who have big players at big prices, United, City, these teams aren't doubling. And so I suppose having a strong bench isn't necessarily a bad thing to do. But in goal, for the starting 11, it is going to be Dubravka, which I am slightly surprised about. Newcastle haven't looked like the strongest defence as of late, but Brighton and Southampton probably aren't the best fixtures either, looking at them. Southampton have looked on pretty good form. Brighton, I'd say, a decent chance of a clean sheet at home there for Dubravka. But when you've got other keepers on offer, offer, like Jose Sa, who's looked fantastic recently. You've also got potentially Mendy of Chelsea, of course, who have been announced with that double game week of Burnley and Norwich. I'm not sure I would be going with Dubravka in goal, but let me know if you're going with him as your first choice keeper this week. Of course, next week in game week 29, maybe a different story, with Newcastle, of course, having 2 double game weeks in a row. In the back 4, then, it's going to be Rudiger, Thiago Silva, Cody, and Saiss. So a double up of Chelsea and a double up of Wolves in there. And this is why we're seeing the 3 Chelsea assets are already in. So Mount on the bench, Rudiger and Thiago Silva in the back line. And going with those 2, I think Rudiger is the most nailed on Chelsea option. I'm pretty sure everyone on anything will mostly have Rudiger in their team this week. And he's a pretty prime option for captaincy as well, with a lot of players, as I mentioned, from those big teams like Salah not doubling. So if you want to go for someone who's a bit more out there, but still in his own way a safe option, Rudiger does not look like a bad pick at all. Thiago Silva is a bit of a cagey one. He's probably a bit more nailed on than Reece James to play more minutes, I suppose, over the 2 games, with Reece James only just returning from injury. But of course, when we're looking at attacking output over the season as a whole and per 90 minutes, Reece James really is the one to go for if you're looking for a Chelsea defender in that bracket. But I can definitely see the appeal of going for someone who you suppose might have a better chance of playing in both those fixtures and grabbing himself 2 clean sheets against Burnley and Norwich. With the Wolves defenders, I do like those 2 picks. Going for the Wolves fullbacks, I think, is a bit risky, of course, with Semedo picking up that injury. Aït-Nouri not nailed on that side. Going with Cody and Saiss does not look bad at all. The only other option really is Kilman, who is a little bit cheaper if you are struggling for cash. But as I mentioned, Cody and Saiss are probably the best 2 to go for, and when you've got the money to spend, you may as well spend what is only a little bit extra as well to get in those guys who have the slightly better attacking statistics in some cases. But as I mentioned, Kilman really is up there as well in other departments. In midfield, then, we're seeing a midfield 4 as well to make it a 4-4-2, and some standout options in there that you would assume are going to be in most teams this week. The likes of Rafinha and Coutinho, who are also captaincy options, as well as Mohamed Salah, who is going to be in almost every team despite only having a single game week against West Ham at home. Coutinho looks my favourite of the midfield picks, really. With Southampton and Leeds, I think these are 2 really nice fixtures, especially the Leeds one, despite being under new management now, of course, with Bielsa leaving. Perhaps we'll see a bit of a tighter Leeds defence, but I still think he is a great option to go for, as is the Leeds man Rafinha himself, who faces Leicester and Aston Villa, who haven't looked the worst of teams recently, but Rafinha does look like the star man to go for, and of course has those penalties, as does James Ward-Prowse, who still manages to keep a place in this team, with Aston Villa and Newcastle up next, and he has looked impressive recently too, so I'm definitely not against having James Ward-Prowse in your side at all. And then finally, we're going to be looking in at the forwards, who Jamie Vardy has been benched for, and that is Jimenez and Adams. So the Wolves forward and the Southampton forward, completing a Wolves triple up and a Southampton double up. As I mentioned, a lot of double game week players quite rightly finding their way into this team. Che Adams has been in fine form recently, despite Broja scoring in the cup. I still do like Adams as an option and would marginally maybe prefer him to Broja. So it really does depend which way you swing. Some people will be limited by cash, and you may as well go for Broja, and you may be able to upgrade other areas if you do go for him. And so in those instances, I think going for Broja is a very nice thing to do indeed. And Jimenez, of course, despite being a potential little minutes risk after a benching in recent game weeks, I think going for him is still a very solid pick, and hopefully it gives him a better chance of playing both games in game week 28, which we should hopefully, fingers crossed, be able to see. And that gives the algorithm team an overall projected points total of 107 for game week 28, which you probably would expect with 10 double game week players in the side, and a captain of Antonio Rudiger, which I did suspect following him being in the side. Burnley and Norwich, 2 very, very nice fixtures for chances of a clean sheet. Burnley, are they going to troll a second week in a row? People who had him in for the free hit, now getting in the Chelsea player after they failed to score. I think going for Rudiger could end up being one of the biggest trolls, and the Burnley players could end up trolling us hugely. But you've got to go with the statistics, and they back the Chelsea defenders all the way. I think a lot of people will still be going for Mohamed Salah, and he is still probably going to be the favourite in terms of captaincy numbers. Whether that lines up with effective ownership or whether it's just dead teams, that will depend on your rank, of course, for the majority of cases. But going Rudiger Rudiger does not seem like a bad shout at all. And if there's any week to go with a little bit of a differential captain, as I mentioned, Rafinha and Coutinho are also shouts as well, then I think this could be the game week indeed. So let me go away now. I'm going to have a little bit of a rejig, show you what I've come up with my team that I've decided to take on the Algorithm 11 and see how different it is to this one that's just been revealed. So here is what I've gone for with my side after I have put together my own personal team if I were free hitting this game week. As you can see, there have been quite a few changes. The overall structure of the team has remained similar. There have been some tweaks here and there, but I think some significant changes when you do look into it deeply. I've managed to keep hold of a double Wolves defense, but I wanted to have Jose Sarr in. I do prefer going with him over going with the Cody and Seiss double up, as I think there are, to be honest, better defensive options in terms of attacking capability this week, and I've put two of them in this draft. Luka Dean was on the bench at third sub for the Algorithm team. Well, I really do like him as an option. He's created a lot of chances in recent weeks, and I think he is due, if you want to put him like that, for a return in hopefully one of these games, at least against Southampton and Leeds, as well as decent chances of a clean sheet there as well. But it was very tough on who to start between him and some of those players you can see down on the bench, and we'll talk about in a minute. I've kept the double Chelsea back line as well, but the key noting being Thiago Silva being replaced by Reece James. I just think it is worth taking the punt on him starting both of them. I think he will start at least one. It's whether he does start both. If Thiago Silva was 100% nailed, I think it would have been a tighter call, but really with Reece James, you're just getting such attacking potential. He's looked great when he has played, getting his minutes built up again, and I think he could be in contention definitely to start both of them. Rudiger has kept the captaincy and he's kept himself in the side, and I think in my own personal team I will probably be bringing him in for Van Dijk this week and maybe even captaining him as well. As you can see, I do think he is the best captaincy option you can go for, so right now my captaincy will be on him. But then I've gone for a little bit of a punt as well with Kai Havertz down there in the midfield. So instead of going Mount, who might still be carrying a bit of a knock, I've gone with Havertz, who I think I've been hurt by against Norwich before. I'm willing to get hurt by him again. But yeah, in a double game week, it looks much more appetizing. Not quite brave enough to stick the armband on him for sure, but going with him, I think, will be a nice little tasty differential for those of you who want a free hit, and of course, who can ditch him 1 week later if he comes back as old Kai Havertz that we know too well as a troll. Rafinha, Salah, and Coutinho had to stay in the team for the reasons I've mentioned before, and then I've brought in Harry Kane to go up there alongside Jimenez, so going with Broja on the bench instead of Che Adams and bringing in big old Harold up top. I was looking at Jamie Vardy as well, who of course has returned and is playing a Leeds side who look notoriously rubbish in defence as of late. Doesn't look like a bad option at all. I was even looking at James Maddison in midfield as a pick too. I don't think they are bad options, and especially long term with those fixtures that they've still got to be rearranged. So yeah, that is what we're looking at for this side. I've got some players like Willock and Parut on the bench as well, who I do think are really good options, and to be honest, if I could free hit and bench boost, this would look like a prime thing to do. Dubravka's down there as well, so these players I all think are really good options, and of course, when you're considering long term, it is really important to think about the blank game week 30 that's coming up, also double game week 29 with teams like Newcastle as well, looking at important graphics on Twitter and finding out what suits your ship strategy plan and your team right now the best. But if you're on a free hit, I think something like this looks absolutely fantastic. But let me know what you think about it down below in the comments. I'm really interested to hear. As always, do you think you prefer my team or the Algorithm team on a 1 week basis only? It's a bit tight this week, but I'm going to go with my own. I really do think I do like it. If I didn't prefer my own, it would be a bit concerning. But yeah, I'm confident this week of hopefully being able to get a point on the board back up against the Algorithm. And yeah, thank you very much for watching once again, and I wish you the best of luck for game week 28. I'll see you so very soon. Goodbye.